All right, let's get into something that, yeah, might sound like a joke you'd hear in middle school, but it's a question that rocket scientists and astronauts have to take super seriously. We're talking about bodily functions in a place where no one has gone before.
I mean, it seems like a simple question, doesn't it? But trust me, the answer is going to take us on this wild ride through physics, biology, and some of the craziest engineering challenges you can imagine when it comes to keeping people alive so far from home.
So, you see, the big takeaway here is that this is way more than just a funny noise or an awkward moment. Figuring this stuff out is absolutely critical if we're serious about long trips to the moon, Mars, or anywhere else out there.
And you might think this is a modern curiosity, but believe it or not, people have been fascinated with this for, well, forever. It has this long, kind of colorful history that goes back way, way before anyone even dreamed of rockets.
What's so cool is you can literally trace this fascination through time. I mean, you've got St. Augustine back in the 5th century writing about performers who could do this on command. Then you jump to 19th century Paris, and you've got this famous stage performer, Lepetomon, the fart cyst. And then bam, fast forward to the 20th century, and suddenly NASA is studying it because they realize, uh-oh, this could be a real problem for us.
So let's get right down to it. How different is it, really? Well, here on Earth, it's pretty simple. Gravity takes care of everything, right? Gas rises, it settles, it spreads out and disappears. But in space? Whoa! All those rules just get tossed out the airlock. The gas has no idea which way is up, so it just lingers. It just hangs there.
So, to really get why that happens, we've got to dive into the basic physics. And it all boils down to this one single concept that changes everything when you're in orbit. And that concept is, you guessed it, microgravity. That feeling of being weightless that you see astronauts floating around in. In that kind of environment, all the stuff we just take for granted down here, like buoyancy, the idea that hot air rises, it just doesn't work the same way. It's a whole new ballgame.
Okay, so let's walk through this step by step. The astronaut, releases the gas. But instead of it rising up and disappearing, the gas cloud just kind of expands out in every direction. It creates this little invisible bubble that just stays put, right there. It has literally nowhere to go.
And get this is a wild little detail. If an astronaut was on a spacewalk outside the ship and, well, it happened, it would be totally silent. No sound at all. Why? Because sound needs something to travel through, like air. And in the vacuum of space, there's nothing. So completely silent, but definitely not gone.
But look, the physics of it is really only half the story. The other half, the part that's maybe even more important, is what's happening inside the astronaut's body. Because going to space messes with our biology in some really profound ways.
I mean, astronauts have to deal with so much. Their muscles start to atrophy, their bones lose density, fluids shift up into their head, giving them that puffy moon face you see in pictures, and, this is the key for us, their whole digestive system just gets completely thrown for a loop.
Think about it. Here on Earth, gravity is constantly helping move things along through your digestive system. But without that constant downward pull, everything slows down, gas gets trapped, and that can lead to some really serious discomfort and bloating for the astronauts. On top of that, even the good bacteria in our gut, the microbiome, can change, making everything even more complicated.
So, okay, we've got these lingering gas clouds and astronauts who are super uncomfortable. That sounds annoying, for sure. But this is where it gets really serious. This whole thing goes from being just an awkward problem to a legitimate safety hazard inside a multi-billion-dollar spacecraft.
Yeah, you heard that right. The number one thing that keeps NASA engineers up at night about this isn't the smell, it's fire. And here's why. The gas we produce, it's not just harmless air. It's actually a mix that contains a lot of hydrogen and methane. And both of those gases are super, super flammable. Now imagine you're in a tiny, sealed metal can pumped full of oxygen. That is a recipe for absolute disaster.
And look, this isn't just some theory. Scientists were worried about this way back in the 1960s during the Apollo era. They actually did studies on astronaut diets just to figure out how to reduce the amount of these flammable gases being produced. That's how serious this was.
So let's just quickly recap the three big problems here. First, you've got the morale problem, the smell, in a tiny space for months on end. Not great. Second, the physical problem. The astronauts are in actual pain. And third, the big one, the safety risk, the flammability. Any one of those is a huge deal when you're trapped in a can millions of miles from home.
So the big question is, how on earth do you solve a problem like this? Well, the answer is with a ton of science and some brilliant engineering. It's just a perfect example of how, in space travel, you have to think of everything. NASA and the other space agencies come at this from all sides. First, there's the diet. That's why you always hear the jokes about astronauts not eating beans before a flight. It's true. Then they've got these incredible, super advanced air filtration systems that are constantly cleaning and scrubbing the air. And finally, they have sensors all over the place to detect even the tiniest buildup of any dangerous gases long before it could ever become a problem.
And this, right here, really gets to the core of why space travel is so incredibly hard. You can't leave anything to chance. Every little, mundane, human thing, every tiny biological detail, you have to plan for it, study it, and build a solution for it. So, at the end of the day, something as simple and, let's be honest, silly as a fart in space becomes this massive, complex puzzle. And solving it takes physicists, biologists, and engineers all working together. It's like a perfect little snapshot of the challenge of space exploration itself.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? I mean, if this is all the science and engineering that goes into just one simple bodily function, imagine what it takes to figure out how to sneeze without flying backwards, or how to cry when your tears won't fall. It just goes to show, if we ever want to live on other planets, we've got to solve the biggest problems out there, and the very, very smallest ones too.